On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, Howie and I sit down with Eric Wittenberg with Camper Machine to talk about camper recruitment and retention and how changes to sales and marketing have occurred from today's world and what that looks like for camp owners. Howie and I filled our to-do list with some great ideas from Eric, and we hope that you will too.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the camp industry, particularly the private camp industry. Hi, everyone. My name is Howie Grossinger, and I am the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood in the suburbs of Toronto.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you're looking to find and to subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/COP or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful for other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. All right. So hello, Howie. Happy Friday. Actually, I think listeners are listening to this on Wednesdays typically. So happy Friday to you, but happy Wednesday to our listeners.
Well played.
Today we're talking with Eric Wittenberg, the creator of Camper Machine, a company that assists camp owners in camper recruitment and retention. Eric's knowledge of the camp industry is extensive, as he has been a camp owner himself. Eric is going to provide us some insight into the things that camp owners should be thinking about when it comes to keeping campers coming back and how to attract new families to your camp. Given the continued challenges provided by COVID-19, we look forward to hearing how our current reality impacts the approaches we should be taking with camp marketing from Eric today.
Yes, Kelly, I think this is the first episode where we're going to sort of really dive into how to attract new campers, how to keep the ones who continue to love you, and get some really great insight from someone who has really been very entrepreneurial about the resource he can be to camps and in assisting them to recruit and to retain their campers. Eric, really happy to have you on the show, and welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's very nice to see you again. Kelly, to meet you today has been great. I totally geek out on recruitment and retention, otherwise known as sales and marketing. So I love chatting about it, especially in the context of, different types of camps. So thanks for having me.
Well, it's really great to have you. I know that you've got a long history in the camp world and, lifelong camper, you started your own camp, branched off to do what you do now. So I think you're uniquely qualified to give us, a breadth of insight that will really help our listeners. And before we dive into some of our questions and some of the things we'd like to talk about today, I thought, as a tradition in our show, Kelly and I always invite our guests to give our listeners, a bit of some insight into their journey in camp, and we'd love for you to share yours.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate that too, because it's kind of how would you make sense of anything that gets said without the where'd you come from, right? So, so I really grew up at a private day camp in White Plains, New York, Elmwood Day Camp, where my mom was a non-owner director with Jeff Ackerman. So they, for 30 years, Jeff originally as part of with the Maury Stein and Ben Applebaum kind of trio, they acquired Elmwood and revamped it. So it wasn't always, a powerhouse day camp in the early years, but as I matured, I saw it turn into a fully mature camp, partially due to some guidance from your extended family, right? But then, so I grew up there, and by the time I was 22, was doing the bus driver training and the athletic director, and kind of managing a team of PE teachers twice my age. And at that point, I felt like there was nothing left to do but run it into the rocks. If I stuck around, there's only you can mess it up. So I actually helped Sam and Alicia Borick start or take over their camp just across the river in Rockland County, New York. So they acquired Woodmont Day Camp, was formerly Candy Mountain. So Candy Mountain, just revitalizing Candy Mountain Day Camp from what it had been to a whole new brand, new life. I don't know if you ever met or heard Sam. He is like energy contained in the human body. So totally new life. So that was a really dramatically different experience than growing up at this legacy sort of camp that had been around for 60 years and had matured. So that startup grind of a day camp and going to every private school, camper fair, the pop-up stands, the lanyard exercise, like that whole grind was really, it was really interesting. I learned so much about speaking to parents and really doing sales. So I had that sort of legacy, then take over kind of day camp experience. And then I actually started a CrossFit gym in San Francisco. We haven't even really spoken about that, but so that was similarly just a camp for adults. Basically, it's a day camp for adults that lasts an hour. And then my wife and I partnered with Dan Zenkel, who had previously started Camp Group, to start the Berkshire Soccer Academy for girls. And that's really where about 10 years ago, that's where I had really cut my teeth on. We started this from a brand concept from nothing to facility, testing different sessions. And we really wanted to make a hybrid of the university style collegiate soccer camp that elite soccer girls would go to, and the traditional overnight camp feeling and setting and experience. And so we learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes, but really found a pattern and a kind of program that really works and does what we wanted to do. And it's working very well.
Wow.
So that's my camp kind of portfolio, I guess. It's kind of my experiences there. And because I was involved in all the starting, that's where I kind of, I just need to bump up against the tools and what other people were doing to, make stuff work. When you want to start stuff, you got to figure out how to get people there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that, our resident ball of energy is Kelly. And I think that, as you mentioned about Sam, so I know we have a bunch of questions about this, because what you've described, I think, really appeals to a real cross section of our audience around, the elements that go in, and we may be able to touch on sort of, how do you begin sales? How, if you're well established, how do you, build on sales, et cetera. And then I know that, we'll get into some of the stuff that you're doing now in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, Kelly, for me, as we navigate the terrain of 2021 and we think about sales and marketing, I know we've talked in past episodes about where we're at on our journey, that cycle of trying to fill our camp, and people and our listeners, when they listen to this, will be at various, different spots on that sales journey. I thought that, as a starting point, Eric, what are some thoughts, for the audience as a starting point to when we're thinking about sales and marketing? I know, we can speak for hours about this, no doubt, but as you've sort of thought about some things you'd like the audience to know, what's a starting point for talking a little bit about where we're at with marketing? And it doesn't necessarily have to be given the COVID reality that many of us are still navigating, but just in general, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of that other stuff.
I was just going to say too, Howie, I think what will be really important is that idea of the time that we're at right now, is that many camps, residential camps, have already opened their registration, and many day camps like yours. And then we're also in this point where many day camps haven't opened their registration yet. And traditionally, so mine hasn't opened, will open the end of January. So it feels like a really good time, maybe harder for Eric to be a guest to talk about both, but it seems like good timing to speak to those that have already opened and are maybe needing to do some more marketing and getting more numbers in, but then also those who haven't opened yet. So some good sage advice who are about to open.
Okay.
You're ready for it, Eric? Here we go.
Well, I had to take notes. I got, well, I'll do it quickly too. First things first is like I think that was how he's kind of leading, is really where do you start? And then Kelly kind of had the question about, if you're about to open, what's next? And if you've opened, now what? So they're kind of related, and I'll tie them together. The first thing first that I always lean into, and again, this is from experience with Berkshire, I really became a data junkie, and research into so Campminder data. I've been working in Campminder for almost 20 years now. So when we started Woodmont, however many years ago, we were one of the first day camps there. Then we used it for Berkshire. But so whether it's Camp Brain, I've also used Camp Brain, CampWise, wherever your data is stored, looking at the data so that you understand where people are coming from and some of the demographics around them. I think Howie might have spoken about this previously, that the sort of classic avatars having a purpose for them really makes it easy to focus. I think that's probably the biggest thing when people are starting out looking at sales and marketing. It feels like there's this term in the business world, TAM, like total available market share. It's like, not everybody in Canada is going to potentially come to your camp, right? So like, how do you, and I'm in North America, right? So how do you filter down the zip codes where it already feels like you have a stronghold to make sure that they stay strong? And in the day camp world, this is like, what school, whatever grade you're heavy in a school, you're going to ride that out. And you're like, okay, we got a great second grade from, Elk Grove Elementary, like super. But now what, once they become seventh graders? And so looking at these, the macro kind of principle here is looking at these leading indicators of where people can and will come from. I just think that that's one of the things that I love doing. Most people don't. It's in that realm of taking time to work on the business, not in the business. It's that sort of like brain executive function thing of, let me take, a day, a year to reanalyze and see how many kids do we get from which province or state or zip code year over year. Is there a 2-year trend? Do I need to fix it? Do I need to look at, I need, whatever, wherever the geo is, there's some specific thing where maybe you lost more than 50% of kids in one group. So I think whatever way it manifests, digging into the data always tells you who you lost and can get back very easily, because that's the cheapest camper is one that's been there before. Right. To find, meaning cheapest for your energy and dollars to go out and bring to camp is what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for many of us camp owners out there, and again, depending on sort of your vintage in terms of how long you've been around, there is something into looking at the data, and something I can fully admit. We're a family camp for, our family run camp for 60 years, and I don't think for a moment that, my wife Sari's dad, Larry, really looked into that at all, in the 90s and early 2000s, and wasn't really very mindful of that. He had much of what we do as professionals in this industry is based on instinct and gut feeling. And we've done it this way for so many years. And, we're all talking the same language when we say those things. And it takes some intentionality to break out of that mold. And I think it sounds like that's what you're speaking to, that the exercise of what you just described could be very enlightening to a new way of, either confirming your gut or just knowing that when you come back to your team, we're saying like, we got a plan and I'd like to propose this, etc. Kelly, are you of that mindset? Some of the stuff that Eric has described, is that where your head's at? You're as our listeners know, you're a relatively new camp owner, and it's interesting to hear about sort of within the last 5-6 years how some of what Eric has described has sort of played out in your own approaches.
Mm-hmm. Well, when he was talking and said, spend at least a day a year working on the business, not in the business, I think that was so key, because we spend every day in the business, that just take a step back. So honestly, when you were talking, what was going through my mind is, oh my gosh, we need a Business of Camp Summit. Every year there should be a day when camp owners come together. And that's the tagline. Like, we need to spend a day a year stepping outside and looking at a business instead of being in it. So I think it's so helpful to think that way, to take the time, because that's what it is, Howie. It's like signing up for a conference and then you're like, oh my gosh, do I have the time to do this? But yes, you need to step back, to look at it. So I thought that was brilliant. A day where you look at your data, you look at your numbers, because that isn't our specialty forte, unless you're Steve Baskin probably. But, I think that's really not as much ingrained in us as camp professionals, is that business side always.
100%. I mean, that's part of what's really rewarding for me to do the sort of like data and technical side of things, is that nobody got into camp to look at spreadsheets. I mean nobody. So I'm sure there's somebody that really got into it for that. But that's sort of data first. And the only thing I want to add there is that specifically there's relating to the zip codes and looking at it, that's super analytical, and you can make it easier to digest and talk about with your team if you visualize the data. So the Pareto principle of you get 80% of your results from the 20% of your effort. There's a Pareto on your zip codes for sure. So if Kelly has 100 zip codes of Minnesota and other states, the kids that are coming to camp, there's 20% of them that are bringing the lion's share of campers. And so there's a website that I use. It's called BatchGeo. I think it's batchgeo.com. And for free, you can generate a map of zip codes. There's tons of them. It's basically just a Google Maps plugin that they're kind of like figuring it out for you. But it's one of the first things I do before I really talk to a camp. I'll see, where are your campers coming from over the last 5 years? I'll generate this map and I'll be like, wow, so you've, over the last 3 years, you've lost your campers in this area, and they don't even know that. Let alone have they called and spoken to people about what's going on. And so BatchGeo is a great tool just so you can share, because not many people, even if you as the camp owner take the day or however long, 20 minutes to do some sort of analytical on the business work, really to give it legs and breathe some life into it, you kind of have to share it with the team and be like, hey gang, look at this. This was our map for the last 3 years, and this was our map for 3 years before that. What do you think happened? What should we do?
I think also it's my experience too, as a camp owner, is that it's a really welcomed exercise by your team too. I think sometimes, bringing your leadership team into those conversations, some of us, whether it's day or overnight camp, and many of us, seasonally, hire teachers and people who are obviously not on our full-time team. But even I have found that while those conversations around marketing and sales are beneficial for the full-time team to dig into, I always find that my team that is sort of on the next layer of involvement, those who don't work the business every day, but you meet with regularly, to bring in the fold so they know what you're thinking or the conversations you have. Because often, as you mentioned earlier, Eric, if the zip codes and the deep dive resulted in recognizing a community or a school, and you have people on your team who are tied to those communities, now, I feel like, and I know for me, it's been really insightful for, as a day camp operator, like I have teachers in those communities. They can tell me what's up, what are the parents in their classes are talking about. And that really helps shape what's happening with approaches we may have to marketing and sales and make it attractive to join our camp. Kelly, have you found that, anything related to that sort of resonates with you?
Well, I think it's for sure those bubbles of, like Eric talked about, is my kids, I noticed their ages were bubbles of kids. And then one of my staff, they work at a school, and all of a sudden there's some more kids coming from that random school in this random neighborhood. So, but I have never done a zip code analysis. So I think that's very intriguing to me to think about that, and that loss, gain, where did these kids go? So I have some good homework after this, Eric.
So well, that's good. So that's kind of connecting that to your other point of, if you're about to open, if you do that research before you touch base with families as part of the opening, granted, we're pretty late in the fall, winter season. Normally this sort of analysis is like September, what happened, and then you use that information to inform your outreach and communication the fall, winter. But imagine if you were about to open and you knew the 5 zip codes that you really wanted to have a stronghold in, and 5 where you were slipping, and 5 that are like in that school, you're this emerging hot brand, right? Because it's different worlds. You would probably have different conversations with families that lived in those 3 places. And you might ask, because Kelly, I liked your term of a bubble. It's like this fleeting, evanescent group of goodness. It's like, oh, there's this bubble from this school, and I know they're going to travel a couple of years and come back and love camp, but then they're going to pop or float away. And so what you really want to do when you think about the structures for, camper recruitment and retention is you want to turn that school into a bubble machine. Like that's the ultimate day camp reference, a bubble machine. Or better yet, a 5-gallon bucket that has a cool rope and you can just like lasso them, right? But so thinking about that, so this was a big insight for me when we started Berkshire Soccer. Every camp that's really thriving generally has a third party group of people that talk about the camp. In day camps, it's usually the school teachers. They're like, I've been teaching elementary school here for 20 years. I always see, the same day camp shirt, and they'll speak positively even if they've never met you. For Berkshire, we didn't have that because we're starting from scratch. And so we generated it with soccer coaches. So we would just kind of build this list of girls' youth soccer coaches and send them value so that even if they'd never met me, never been to camp, they could speak positively when someone said, hey, coach, do you know of a camp I should go to? And so I think that's probably like the extreme kind of like deep dive on the principle when you're doing follow-up informed by research, to a first-year camper in a new zip code. You want to learn more, but like, how'd you hear about us? Because what they said on their, camp brain form is not actually what happened, right? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of individual follow-up after the research, knowing what you want for the business will lead you to ask a question like, oh, I'd love to talk to the assistant principal that told you about us. I wonder how they know about us, whatever. And so that's how you turn a bubble to a bubble machine, is create a relationship with the person that's not going to move up.
Yeah,
I know that's a lot, but
yeah, no, it's great, and it's very insightful, and I think that's a really great sort of insight for our day camp people who are listening to the show. Is there an equivalent overnight camp? When you think of the sort of obviously the geographical hugeness that our overnight camps can attract from. Is there an equivalent example or something, a tip that you can sort of instill in our overnight camp owners about some things that they should be doing, or maybe some things, things that they should be thinking about as it relates to maybe even creating a bubble machine for overnight camp?
Totally. There's kind of let's take a spectrum of overnight camps from specialty to kind of traditional long session. The specialty ones are easier because if you have a specialty and you do it well, other people in your specialty but not in summer camp need to know about you if they're good at what they do. And so if you're running a STEM robotics overnight camp for 4 weeks, every science teacher that is like a leader in that field ought to know about that. So the specialty folks is frankly, it's easier, right? If there's a volleyball camp, and you know this, right? There's a volleyball coach that's influential and they kind of bless your camp and talk about it favorably. That's a low level. A higher level commitment would be like, there's a link talking about your camp on the site and you sponsor one of their tournaments. And that's a bubble machine. It's like, if I'm going to Coach Howie's volleyball camp and there's always, this relationship, that's good.
Well, that's really interesting because as you know, Eric knows some of the stuff I'm involved in. So I'm a partner in a volleyball camp, and this is sort of also related to how you can spend your resources too. The specialty, I know for us, the marketing in terms of the spend is much more focused on the one or two things that we know the community we're attracting is always going to as a reliable source. And so I think, that example and just talking about the specialty overnight camp, for the volleyball camp that I'm involved in, I just have to go to the Provincial Volleyball Association website, develop a relationship with us, or go to their provincial championship or something, have a presence. And we've often been part of, I guess, what they would call their volleyball fair. We have a place where 13 to 17-year-old volleyball players and their parents can be. And from a spend point of view, that's the spend for the year. Like, we know that's where we're going to get our campers. So I think that's a great example. And I'm glad you started with, and I'm curious to hear about the long season traditional camp approach, but for the specialty, I can relate to that one for sure.
Yeah. So on the traditional camp side, there's two real ways that I've seen it play out. One is really doubling down on your special sauce as a traditional camp is the people that have been there. So the best case is alumni. I mean, alumni is essentially, if you've camped that's been around a while, that's the most valuable untapped resource that returns, incredible results for everything that you do. So granted, not everybody has that, and it takes 20, 30 years to build before you have a potential source of, campers coming. But even staff, returning staff, I've seen, I'll throw one number out there. There was a traditional camp that had a sports specialty person that was just the coolest. And he brought 30 campers across the country because he spoke about camp and was, I'll say he was active and had the language pre-built to make it attractive to campers. And frankly, a little bit of an incentive structure. I'm sure that didn't hurt. But that's the specialty. The specialty is you have this little bubble that you have keys to, and you can invite people in. I mean, there are ways, there are also the other kind of ways, there are kind of, you might not view them as a specialty, but they are a kind of specialty if you were to compare traditional camps. So like at Robin Hood or I'm gonna pick a real camp. If you have a very loving, nurturing sort of place where kids are really exposed to a breadth of new things, that's the specialty. The generalist nature is a specialty.
Mm-hmm. So for Eric, for camps that are either have done this work of looking at what their specialty is or how they can promote themselves, or looking at their zip codes and they're up and down, or maybe they're looking at their numbers right now and thinking, okay, this year more than ever, we need to do some more recruitment and retention, whether people are nervous because of COVID and the current state of things, or they just are in that moment that they need to need to make it a priority. What
Yeah.
would you say to those camps that are realizing that, or are starting to think, all right, we need to make this a more of a priority than we have before?
Yeah. Well, there's two principles at play. The first is that it's a totally different world right now, and safety is the new marketing. So if you don't have the COVID banner on the top of your website, with the title might change every month from here on out, but if you don't have a way to answer people's questions about what you're going to do or what you might do, then you're not answering the question that's the most. They're not looking for your dates and rates at the moment. They're looking to see, is this a safe place, for my kid to be. And so, as an example, so I do a lot of like SEO search for all the camps I'm working with. I'm constantly looking at what's happening. And so search traffic can be broken up into branded searches, like Camp Robin Hood Howie, or non-branded search, things that are generic. So camps near me, with swimming, something like that. Something that has emerged in like almost every group of branded searches is a pattern of, is Robin Hood open 2020? Is Robin Hood open 2021? COVID policies, Robin Hood. It's like there are a lot of questions that people first ask Google before they ask you. I mean, some of them you could just imagine they're going to ask, right? It's not, there's no high EQ required to predict some of these questions. But the exercise of going through it and thinking about how am I answering these questions for someone that's not yet talking to me? This is kind of a harder, so it's a harder thing to come across.
Yeah, and I think as well, and maybe, some of the reality for particularly our overnight camps, they have not been given guidance to open, right? And they have started registration not even knowing if 2021 is going to happen. And, we're all working hard in the industry to get every jurisdiction early in the year to give the green light to everybody. And I thought that maybe, I think starting with what's on the mind of 2021 parents, how are you going to navigate this depending on where we're at when camp starts? But there's also this idea, and I know there's a nervousness amongst camp owners of like, I haven't been told I can open, and I'm really nervous to start even advertising and marketing and the spectrum of sizes and wherewithal of all the camps in our industry, some are still really nervous and holding off. So, now that I've mentioned that, what comes to mind, Eric, is any advice that you would give those camps that are still really worried about pulling the trigger on starting even opening registration?
Okay, so these are the yeah but people that are great on every team. They're they edit the documents, and you need an Oxford comma here. The yeah but sort of mentality. It was really, I value it because I'm the kind of person where like I'll rush to build something and then think about it afterwards by instinct. So if you're feeling hesitancy about saying that you're going to do something that you might not do, but you need to do something, otherwise you're going to miss the chance to do something. You just need to get really crystal clear on the conditional nature of what you're saying. And so there are three components to that. One is timestamp your comments. So on your COVID page, I would say something. There's literally words. We are planning to open at this date. We're working with our province, state, country on records. Link if you want to. As of right now, we are planning on opening with these conditions, and then use last updated, and then timestamp it.
Right.
And then all you can do, you're not promising that the world is going to spin a certain way. but you're saying this is what we plan to do. This is the last time we thought this. And then you just have to update it as it moves. And so, look, this is the most pressing thing camp directors and owners are looking at is, okay, great, there's vaccines in Europe. Great, there might be this or the month we'll have them here. You're likely going to have states reacting to and provinces reacting to a new problem of 20 to 50% of campers might be vaccinated this summer. So they're going to creating new policies again. We think it's going to be easy like it's like better than last year, but it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably know the arc of conversation you're going to have throughout the spring and into summer. It's like we planned for this, we're changing because of these things. And so you can leapfrog all of the worry about that if you just say that now.
Mm-hmm.
Say, we're going to have a monthly update. I'm sorry, I'll let you.
No, I was just going to say my favorite thing you just said in that spiel or discussion was for the people not yet talking to you, which is so powerful because you're so right that there are those people that just automatically pick up the phone. But I haven't heard it put that way before. So it really struck me that you're so right that so many people will look at your website before they talk to you. So that's who you're really speaking to is like, because I'm not talking directly, I need to be able to say to you with my website what I would say to you if you called me. So that's awesome. I really like that takeaway.
Well, one of the things that we just did, which obviously is not new and many people are probably doing this, but for us, the first time is, a pop-up on our website with dates of Zoom information nights, access to Sari and I, and I'm sure people are doing this, but we've had recently that experience and we're pleasantly surprised. I mean, there was some nervousness, we've done information nights, but with, the reality of Zoom these days and, should I guide them through a deck of slides and speak to each thing? But, finding the balance of, for me in that moment, Eric and Kelly, I'd love your comments on it is, what was on my mind is how much of that time in this, I guess it's in a marketing approach. I want to talk to new families. Do I want to spend talking about what the camp experience at my camp is like and how much of it should be specifically COVID? I can tell you that was sort of a tension that I had. And I actually made the conscious decision, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. We've gotten some feedback from it. It was really about, this is what our camp is all about. And for everything that we talked about in terms of elements that parents are on the minds of parents, whether it be my program, my swim program, transportation, we had a brief COVID-19 implications for 21 sort of add-on. It wasn't dominant. And I think the feedback I'm getting is that was good. I didn't want to bill it as, hey, let's talk about COVID in camp. I didn't want to bill it as that. I billed it as get to know us better. So I just wanted to share that because, as we think of ways to engage families who are just getting on your website and that really good advice about time stamping and having a banner or something that says to a prospective family or a returning family, this is what's on our mind related to COVID that they can find. I hope everyone is doing that because I think it's pretty valuable.
I hope so too. And I think most people had them up at some point, but I noticed that some people started taking them down towards the end of the summer in August or the fall. But so I actually want to share since that point resonated with Kelly about the people that aren't calling you. I wanted to share. I'll draw it on the whiteboard here. I know as we explain it. I know some people might watch these.
Good thing I showered, so that I actually watch this. I mean, I didn't shower. I used dry shampoo, but at least I, look presentable. Jeez, Eric.
So, because this is significant, this is like across the business world, not just camps. If there's normally marketing happens at the top of a sales funnel, and sales happens. This is where somebody actually decides to give you your money. It's down at the bottom of like an inverted pyramid. So normally or historically, the top is people before they engage with you. It's like, come on the website, ask about you, ask a friend. They're not yet calling sales as like a call to ask a question or come for a tour and go to a parlor talk sort of like meeting. And so the thing that has happened with COVID is that time and what you say, time to talk and investigate has gone down. Everyone's on the internet all the time. And so this sales line has moved down. So people are, this is across all things. You might notice it in your life if you're like not calling as much. You're like, okay, get me to the chat as fast as possible, or let me search this website. There's certain things that you're looking for now. And so this is the principle why having a pop-up to say what's important is important. If you don't have a chat tool or chat bot thing on your website, or the top banner to get to COVID, you're not making it easy for people to kind of take that first step by themselves. And I'm not, I kind of have to offer a disclaimer here that I'm not in the camp where I want technology to do everything. But for people to show up and be human as camp directors, you want to pick the right times to do it. I think there's an overly hopeful sort of thing, like I close 9 out of 10 families if I get them on the phone, but there might be like the other 90 families don't call you because they can't figure out your phone number. So anyways, that's.
Okay. So for people who couldn't get on to see us, you had the upside down triangle, which basically was a funnel. And if I'm going to do a recap from that, essentially the top was marketing of the big triangle. The bottom little point was sales. And you originally 2019 up to 2019, the little squiggly to divide that between sales and marketing was half. And now that line has gone down. So it's like 75% marketing, 25% sales. So we need to really do a lot more marketing, because the sale is that, am I right to say that it's a lot more marketing and less sales right now? Oh, you're muted, Eric. Sorry.
It's not necessarily that you need to do more marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that people want to learn more about you before they talk to you.
Got it. Okay. So
more marketing, to stay with the funnel image, but more marketing would be like throwing more stuff in the funnel. And I think more like traffic on I'm sure most people are thinking, oh, you need to go get more audience.
Okay.
There's the next game, and I do view it as kind of like a game that's fun to play. The game is simply how many people know about you, how many look at this prospective sales web pages, how many give you their information, how many did you talk to, how many enroll.
Okay.
It's just a game. It's just a fun game. And so what I'm saying is that there's a gap that's emerged where people aren't calling to talk to you about your COVID potential policies. To tie it back to the COVID banner and like what you're doing or how your program is changing. They kind of want to be able to snoop and see that before they spend the time to really engage with you.
And I think that goes for not only the families that are already familiar with you, but even new families, because, the reality of 2020 is we've had, a range of decisions by families, which camps have supported. You want to keep, I'm back in 2021, keep my money. I want to get my money back because my circumstance is X, and I'm going to consider next summer. And so, I think it feels equally effective whether you're in recruitment or retention, whether, that approach is equally applicable to both groups. The ones that are familiar with you and the ones that said, hey, my neighbor told me to check out Hidden Pines Ranch and I'm checking it out. I don't know the first thing about it, versus the person who knows you and say, hey, you know what? I want to find out what, Kelly and her team are doing. I've loved them in the past. I just want to, before I make the call, I want to find out more before I give Kelly a call to ask her about 2021. Do I have that right? Like it's equally applicable?
100%. Because these are if you don't communicate this stuff either directly to people or on the website when they go looking for it, you're losing them in that marketing sales gap on the pyramid, where it's kind of like, if you had just said, Hidden Pines Ranch is having a monthly webinar to keep any interested parents up to date about how, Minnesota governance is changing. It's going to be Kelly. And, that would be enough to get people to come back, or for new people to be like, okay, this is the kind of safe camp that probably has the right amount of lifeguards with the right training, with like how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I totally subscribe to that. So you're totally right, Howie. One thing that kind of just came up for me that I realized is an important piece of this is that for camps that didn't operate in 2020, they likely have a new segment. So I'm really big on segmentation of, you don't just have like campers. You have returning campers. You have first year campers. You have first year alumni campers. You have first year referral campers that signed up just because their neighbor comes and they know nothing about you. And so everybody's different. They're just different. And so there's a new segment that has emerged that is of high value pocket that I think everybody needs to make sure that they're talking to in a specific way. And that's the rolled over a deposit or took a refund after enrolling for their first year in 2020.
Right.
So they trusted you, and for whatever reason they couldn't come to camp, whether because they opted out and you ran or you couldn't run. Those are the easiest campers to stay connected and regain and keep that trust going. And so if you're not speaking to them, if you're speaking to them like returners, you're kind of off base because they don't really get what the hype is about because they didn't experience it. So normally there's like a returner new bracket really is where people make a big divide. But this group, especially if it's a big recruitment year for you, if you have 100 new campers that didn't get to come in 2020, I would really spend the time to speak to them and reach out to them, look at the data behind that.
Yeah, everyone can go in their software and just figure out like camper history, and now everyone is now feeling really tech savvy because I can go in and I can filter this and so it's just, I think our listeners, their light bulbs going up because I know what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to just get that data, which is where we started.
Envision that camp brain tag for that, however you find it, right?
Yeah,
because it's different.
Yeah, I like that though, because like you said, Howie, I think that's exactly what I'm hoping listeners are feeling, because I'm feeling that way too. So what I want to do, like how Gabs does it on their podcast, she does the recap. So what I'm doing right now is making that list. So Eric, what I want to do is make that little list of what Howie and I have picked up on, the tools like that people will take away from this. So I have one, like your COVID banner. 2, if you have it like a chat box, chat now, direct inquiry. 3, we like thinking about that new segment. So we are making a video for our families about registration coming up. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video for those that were going to come that didn't for the first time, and then my returner. So yes, those are my 4 big ones that I have. Howie, did I miss any?
I know. I thought those were great.
Okay.
I mean, those
Eric,
are.
Any other ones?
No, I just want to add to that last one. Think about, like, vividly as you're thinking about making a video, think about the difference between a generic, so you didn't get to come to camp last year for everybody, versus the experience at Hidden Pines Ranch and what you missed out on last year. You'll get back. Like, it's easier for me to put emotion into that last sentence because I'm speaking specifically to a human. It's like there's a returning 3rd grader, and it's totally different when it's saying you got robbed of your first chance to come to camp last year as a 1st grader. It's like you can put emotion and more humanity into segments because the people behind it are vivid and real.
Yeah, that's great. And listen, what we do is emotional, and and we're passionate about what we do. And, we're living at a time where we need, the world needs kids being kids again. And parents are desperately seeking their kids to be kids again for them to get back on track themselves. And we are the industry that is perfectly situated to deliver that in a way that no other child supervision sort of world can deliver. And I think for all of us, that is for me, a big component of the messaging that we're trying to do across the board, is that, real focus on, more important than ever kind of stuff, however you want to express that. Is it fair to say, Eric, that the references you've been applying, to websites could be easily adapted to our various social channels and other things like that? And you would encourage us to, continue to, sort of look at that as also places where we're doing some of that messaging and marketing?
100%. There's a pre-COVID, I was in the middle of building like an Instagram 101 course, because one of the things, it's like a pet peeve of mine. Your Instagram bio is a brochure for your website, not anything else. And so if you ran last year and you have highlights on Instagram, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Instagram and highlights and all this, but there's a specific place where you can, bring attention to things about camp. And so if you're one of the camps that was given the chance to run, and you ran and operated and had a healthy, safe summer, I would be singing about that. And if you're on the podcast or webinars talking about it, I would make sure, the how we did it sort of story is easily viewable. And I think I would re-tie that in, with a thread into any updates, right? So if you're going to update people once a month, twice a month, you're always referencing. It's like, well, similarly to last year. Right? So yeah, 100%, Howie. I think that's sort of, and really what to our first point of really taking time to look in on the business and not work in. This sort of journey mapping is something I first stole it from Intuit like 15 years ago. They have this great Intuit makes this company that makes TurboTax and all this big software. And so they map the journey of somebody that just wants to solve how to do their taxes without an accountant. And so if you were to take time now and map the journey of how to save your kid with play and some loving adults at camp, how would you find your camp and what would you want to see? And that's a deep dive into working on the business. Most people won't do. But that's the sort of thing where you would definitely be like, okay, is there a link tree or link in bio, link in your Instagram that shows your COVID-19 page first and foremost? So there's a lot of, 100% how you're spot on.
Right on.
Oh, Eric, it's a Friday, so I will, I really have a lot to do all of a sudden. I mean, thank you very much. Thank you very much. There goes my Friday.
Oh, I'm sorry if that but Friday is the best day to build a to-do list, because then it makes Monday easy.
No, I am grateful. I feel really grateful. And I know that you didn't come on this podcast to, one, give me a huge to-do list and Howie, but two, because of what you do. I know that you just graciously said yes to us because it would be helpful to the camp world, but I do want to spend a moment because of that, giving you a chance to just mention your business. Because the thought that I had when you were talking about your experience was, holy cow, he's done the really hard work, and it wouldn't be recreating the wheel if he helped us. Because it sounds like you've had such a vast depth of experience, and you started from the bottom and brought things up, but continued legacies also. So will you just tell us a little bit about Camper Machine? If people are sitting right now and saying, yes, great to do's, but I don't have the time for that, I want someone else to do it. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So what Camper Machine is a consulting kind of is I help people find, basically it's coaching and the technology that allows them to influence the relationships that drive the camp's business. And so I worked really hard to make that as few words as possible. and really, but that's truly what it is, right? So it's the matching the technology and the marketing stack, or like whatever tools you use, to the people that are actually running camp so that you can most effectively influence the relationships that are behind the camp's business. And so that looks different for a lot of camps, given short session, long session, whether you have, lots of campers or not so many campers. But the technology, find the technology and the ways to have it fit the people and the camp. And so it can replace the things that can be automated and map them out with the right messaging so that people can show up with humanity when and where they need to.
Mhm.
So that takes forms of different tools. Sometimes it's just coaching, it'll help in research. But because every camp, I find that a lot of camps think, oh, all camps were all the same. But my view is that camps are as unique as people's appetites and opinions and tastes. So I think it's very easy to find unique differences between camps and programs.
And since you also have CrossFit experience, like, does hiring you also involve like some kettlebell things while you're doing some consulting, or like, is there a CrossFit perk there too?
Yeah, burpees if you don't show up on time.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah,
we want the most bang for our buck here. So
yeah. Well,
very nice.
And here's, I'll just leave you might like this. So this is like so on my website, I have a try it button, but it's basically an automation play that shows people, one of the ways or a principle of how you can get people to engage with your content and then follow up specifically, but automatically. And so that's like the easiest way to show the sort of like segmented technological approach where, if you go ahead and fill it out, you'll get another email asking if you want a friendship bracelet. And then I'll, like, Kelly, if you fill it out, I'll mail you. I will literally, my kids and I will make a friendship bracelet for the colors you request. So feel free to go. Feel free to book one.
I love that. Oh, that's awesome.
I know.
Sold.
Howie, you can have one too. It's fine.
Yes, I want one too.
Then Howie and I could be twinsies. And then when we're recording, we could see them. Oh, I love it. Okay.
I would love that.
I would too. So Eric, we've gotten to that time at the end of our show where we always end with something that's inspiring us right now. It can be a book, article, podcast, documentary, anything really that would inspire us to be better camp professionals and leaders. So as a good role model, I will start and share what mine is. And mine this time is an event. I just attended the Women in Camp Summit for the past 2 days. And I am just on a high of feeling connected, proud to be a woman in the camping industry. And so I just wanted to share that with other women in the camp industry to put on their calendar for next year. And it just is a phenomenal event run by phenomenal camp professionals and worth taking the time to spend 2 days at. So that's what I wanted to share today. Howie, do you want to go next?
For sure. I continue to be on the journey of books that I've been sharing recently, and I wanted to share with you that I'm in the middle of reading a really interesting book called The Soul of an Entrepreneur, and it's written by David Sachs, Canadian who's got camp background, and it really is a book that looks at the world today is obviously with Silicon Valley and those television shows and startups and the definition of entrepreneurship right now. But this book actually, I think, would resonate with camp owners because for so many of us, it's the realization of a dream. We grew up in a place, and he really, debunks a lot of thoughts around people are stuck in a certain definition in 2020 of entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship has existed forever. The small and pop, store, the family business, and camp people are passionate. And one element of being a successful entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who has ridden the roller coaster of success and failure is we bring passion to everything we do. So it's a good book. I'm halfway through it. I just think, sometimes as camp owners, we don't always see ourselves as entrepreneurs in the class, whatever the current classic definition is, but we are. And it doesn't take much, and during the last year, to recognize, as business owners, the impact and the things that we're working hard to see ourselves on the other side. But it's a good read. It's and I recommend it. So it's called, once again, The Soul of an Entrepreneur.
Perfect. Okay, Eric, would you like to go next?
Yeah. My inspiration is a quote that probably over the summer, a mentor I was kind of griping about camps closing and states, all that. And he kind of challenged me to take on the perspective of, as an exercise, not that any of this in 2020 has been great for anybody, but his phrase that he forced me to look at things with was, maybe what's bad is good and what's good is bad. And if, when the world's upside down, kind of looking at it upside down. So for instance, that's forced some perspective around, if you had a change you wanted to make in the camp's business, this is the perfect time to do it. And you can kind of like leapfrog, years ahead. So I've done that in a couple different ways. For me and Camper Machine, I've seen camps do it in a way that, they changed calendar around, sessions, staffing. They always wanted to get away from the international staff and they wanted more domestic. So now they kind of forced them in that. So no one solution necessarily, but just a perspective change to kind of how could something that feels bad be good?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's been related to a lot of the stuff about necessity is the mother of invention. Silver linings. Just we're forced into thinking and looking introspectively differently. So I think that's a great message, and really sort of tied into the expertise you bring in terms of sort of the famous word of 2020 is, I think, pivoting. I don't want to use it too much, but I did it, so you can all be mad at me. but regardless, I think that's great, and thanks for sharing that with us. Wow, Kelly, this has been a really informative, educational, and insightful discussion. And Eric, thank you so much for making the time to join us. From the West Coast, where the weather's a little better than it is in Toronto and in Stillwater, Minnesota at this point. So we're a little jealous. But if our audience wanted to get a hold of you, Eric, learn more about you or learn more about Camper Machine, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So the website's campermachine.com, or Eric, ERIC, at campermachine.com. And I'm happy. I love chatting about this stuff. So even if somebody just wants to chat, I'm not no bill for the first 15 minutes. That's not my style. So I just like to chat and help people. So
right. Well, listen, you were brought up in the camp world. That's the way we roll. So there you go. So it comes naturally to you. Yeah, so that's something that we can all be proud of for sure. Kelly, how can people get a hold of you and learn more about what you do?
Well, I'm too busy, so don't email me today because I have homework from Eric. But if you want to talk to me next week, I think I'll be more open. And my email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com.
Amazing. And if you'd like to get a hold of me and learn more about what we're doing north of the border, it's Howie at camprobinhood.ca. And you can learn more about our camp at camprobinhood.ca. Please don't forget that you can find all the show notes at gocamp.pro/COP. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. Kelly and I may even want to draw that inverted triangle and put a resource on our show notes. Who knows? I think she's the artist, but we'll see. Folks, thanks again for joining us on the Camp Owners Podcast. We'll see you next time. Be safe, stay healthy, and thanks again.